This story takes place a while back in 2019. I was a senior in high school, and the friend group I was a part of at the time was bored and wanted to try something fun for our hangout time outside of school. So we made the plans and prepared, and my boyfriend at the time was our dungeon master. To preface this was my first ever D&D campaign, so I was really nervous and had no frame of reference. I made a bard rogue who was a jilted lover and not fertile due to a past incident, which I ran by the DM, and he approved. Things started really good. It wasn't bad until my dungeon master made an NPC that he grew a little obsessed over. In an out of session, that character was like all he ever talked about. The character was introduced when the party took a contract to capture the world-famous pirate king Faraday in exchange for something or other. So me being the only female in the group and a bard, everyone else laid out the plans that I was going to seduce Faraday in the little pirate bar while the dudes set a trap in the room. I was supposed to lead the pirate there and bing bong. However, things like this are never as straightforward as they seem. I rolled ridiculously high, and Faraday was hooked. And we go up to the room, and the DM asks me to roll. Roll for what? To make a save against being charmed. I didn't know this, but elves are resistant to stuff like that. Hesitantly, I made the roll while a few of the guys at the table protested. It boiled down to, because I said so, and I didn't want an argument, so I did the roll, and I failed the roll with a natural 1. We fortunately had a fade to black scene, then the words out of his mouth shook me. The words out of his mouth are shaking me too, dude! This prompted more questions from the players, and this time I actually spoke up. No, I'm not doing that, and you know why. He eventually dropped it, and after that session, things really weren't the same for me, gaming-wise. The campaign fell off not long after that. TLDR, my ex-boyfriend, Dungeon Master, tries to make an infertile character do a check and kills the vibe of the game. Did it kill the vibe of your relationship too? Because, I mean, if I was, I would end it. Just saying. I've been a forever DM for my group since high school. Want to do something special for my friend Zoe's birthday. Inspired by a tale of AD&D players completing the original Demon Web Pits module in 36 hours, running on nothing but Mountain Dew and cigarettes, I wanted to run as much of Princes of the Apocalypse for 5th edition as possible in a single weekend. This session would certainly be among my most memorable. But not for the reasons I had hoped. The weekend would end up being a revolving cast of players coming in and out of Zoe's apartment. But the main character was undoubtedly Zoe's human druid, Ellis, taking inspiration from the country boy character of the same name from the Left 4 Dead 2. I don't know why that name messed me up so much. Ellis would be a simple rural farmer who became a druid. I was expecting someone who would break into random anecdotes about his buddy Keith and do cute things like grow vegetables for his friends. Ellis may have started out this way, but it wasn't meant to last. The campaign started on Friday nights. I had gotten off of work around 9 p.m. and made the long commute back to my town, where the party and I would get right into the game at Zoe's new apartment. There, the adventure started like any other. However, we started to notice some water was dripping in from the ceiling above us. Did we question why there was a leak in a ceiling with a room above it while it wasn't even raining? Of course we didn't. We just thought it was kind of annoying and moved the entire card table covered with all of our battle grids and miniatures and continued our combat. Somewhere in the deep dark hours of the night, Ellis had transformed his character concept. What was supposed to be a friendly, wholesome farmer had somehow become a sort of rural, backroad serial killer. He started to talk and act like a supernatural criminal from an X-Files episode. Not quite knowing what was going on, I rolled with it as Ellis committed atrocities upon monsters and NPCs. Our friend Clark's whimsical gnome wizard, Bismarck, cast invisibility and literally noped out of the adventure outside of a keep we were about to enter, no longer able to stomach Ellis's mayhem. Fortunately, this allowed Clark to bring back a legend of our table, Viet, the natural evil dwarven cleric of Hextor. Reading the room, I planted an evil NPC to join the party, a lawful evil sorceress named Circe, who was kept prisoner in the keep's dungeon. Somehow, an evil party had been born of this quest against elemental evil. All the while, the card table gradually moved across the living room as the mysterious leak continued to follow us. By that Sunday, the campaign had fallen into murder hobo chaos. Our evil party was wading through the encounters posed by the elemental temples. At this point, some players had left and others had joined, including my fiance Max and our friend Meryl. The leak, which we never stopped to address, had caused us to set up a long table in the middle of the apartment near the kitchen area. During a break in the action, Meryl got up to get a soda. I recall walking over to talk with her or to get one myself when suddenly I hear a loud crack, followed by a thud. We look over in shock and we see a hole in the ceiling above us. Unfortunately, part of the drywall clipped Max's shoulder. But right next to Max, Meryl's chair was completely filled with rubble. We all immediately realized how differently this would have gone if Meryl had not stepped away when she did.
What the fuck?
This brought a whole new meaning to the old rocks fall, everyone dies adage in the D&D community. We immediately called the game so Zoe and her girlfriend could deal with this situation. We were told the apartment above theirs had an appliance overflow while no one was there. Max was alright, though her shoulder was sore for a few days. Ever since, 5 years into marriage, Max's mantra to me anytime it comes up is no more evil parties. I know this isn't a typical RPG horror story, but the real life consequences of running an evil party was a surreal encounter and the strangest experience I've ever had while role-playing. To this day, some say Ellis is still out there, stalking the roads that run through the somber hills. Obviously, if everyone's cool with it, nothing wrong with running an evil campaign, though I will say, if a DM doesn't plan for an evil campaign, it's not good for him to spring it on them out of nowhere. Talk to them about it at session 0. Ask, hey, what kind of campaign are you interested in running? Because this is the campaign I'm interested in playing. And who knows, maybe you can switch things around and create a new experience for all of you. But it's good to give them a heads up so they can actually, prep around it. It'll make the experience better for you, trust me. The real horror is obviously the appliance overflow. I've actually been in a similar situation myself. My upstairs neighbor was not keeping track of their water heater and let the thing leak for a long time. And eventually I went to my storage room where I was keeping a few paintings and saw that the floor was flooded with water, there was mold everywhere, and my paintings were ruined. Anyway, yeah, there you go. Mini IRL horror story for you guys. But yeah, it's good to see a wholesome one. We're not gonna see that again in this video. It is getting harder and harder for me to run my Pathfinder and Starfinder games at the same time. I love both games, but finding maps for both sci-fi and fantasy is getting hard. I want to have consistent quality, but I'm having trouble finding it. Thank God for CzePeku Sci-Fi. This video is once again sponsored by CzePeku, back again to show you guys something a little bit different. We are used to seeing their incredible fantasy maps, which you can get on Patreon starting at just the $1 tier, but on top of that, I am here to show you their incredible sci-fi maps. For you lovers of spacefaring adventures, CzePeku Sci-Fi has you covered with beautiful maps of both the interiors and exteriors of incredible ships. And just like CzePeku's fantasy maps, these sci-fi maps also have plenty of diverse variants that you can get access to at higher tiers. Also, just like the fantasy maps, if higher tiers aren't your thing, no problem. You can start at just the $1 tier, getting the base variant of every sci-fi map they'll release and every sci-fi map they have released. And by the way, this goes for all of their Patreons. That library is getting bigger and bigger by the day. CzePeku never give up on quality. For years, they have been creating incredible maps for sci-fi and fantasy, and those libraries are only expanding, giving you access to so many awesome battlefields to place your party into. If you guys are interested, you can head down into the description down below or head to the pinned comment where you can find the Patreons for both CzePeku, their fantasy maps, and CzePeku Sci-Fi. Thank you so much, CzePeku, for sponsoring this segment of today's video. As always, supporting our sponsors does support us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn back into an animated rat so that we can get back to the video. So just to clarify, the story also happened to be my first D&D experience ever. Luckily, this didn't deter me away from D&D as a whole, but it definitely was a particular experience. Well, I guess that means it wasn't that bad.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
I was playing with my friend, Emily, her boyfriend, a buddy of theirs who we'll call Ryan, and of course our dungeon master, who originally seemed to be a decent person and was really enthusiastic to play with us. My boyfriend was invited to play as well, but he didn't really seem to be a fan of playing with two strangers, so he politely passed, which was, funny enough, the right decision to make. Before starting our session 0, we took all the time we needed to discuss our characters' stats, backstories, and even got our own individual dream sequences from our dungeon master. I started playing a cleric female Kenku named Kerr that I stupidly got attached to. Being my first D&D campaign, I didn't think this would be an issue, so I gave the character a lot of characteristics and personality that I had shared. When I brought the idea of my character being a Kenku to our dungeon master, he was really quick to make changes. The first change he wanted to make was pretty understandable because I wanted to speak without just mimicking things, which a lot of DMs allow for anyway, since it can get pretty annoying after a while of just hearing repeated phrases. But then he wanted to give my Kenku wings, which was a problem because I had planned with sticking with the Kenku curse and incorporating that into Kerr's character and story. So I told him I did not want her to have wings, and still at least retain some of the curse, which he seemed slightly annoyed at, but allowed at the time. He also didn't allow much creative freedom as he gave us our backstories instead of allowing us to create them. It was really clear that he was going off a Vox Machina, which was kind of weird for an experienced DM to try and pull off, but oh well. Later on during our character's development, me and Emily, who was playing a female artificer changeling, had joked about chest size and whether we should roll for it as a joke. But our dungeon master had other ideas and instead stated it was enforced that all female characters had to roll for chest and rear size, and males had to roll for pee-pee size. I would act all surprised, but I've literally seen this before. I barely know this guy for a day, and that's not enough time for me to be fully comfortable with these kind of jokes, but I went through with it anyway to not be a buzzkill. I had to roll for Emily too, since she had no percentile dice at the time, which was what we had to roll, and unfortunately we both got 90s on our chest rolls and stupidly high rolls on our rear rolls. Ryan was playing a female dark elf, so he also had to roll, which the DM did for him, and coincidentally rolled high on both checks. And Emily's boyfriend, who played a Tortle monk, aka basically Master Oogway, also had the DM roll, who coincidentally gave him a 90 on his check. We all had a good laugh at the time, but it still felt a little weird to make this a mandatory thing. It didn't feel malicious, but it just felt incredibly odd. After this event, I felt a little awkward. I had told my boyfriend about this, and he was concerned, so I immediately went to the dungeon master to let him know that I didn't want Kura to be involved in any explicit situations, and if there was any romance involved, my character would want to keep it wholesome and minimum. He assured me that he would respect me and my boyfriend's wishes, and even asked the other player characters if they had any limitations, of which Emily made it pretty clear that she wanted her character to be asexual to avoid those interactions. It seemed like everyone was on the same boat, and after a week or so preparing, we finally started session 0, but it was a doozy. We were given a Warforged NPC named Grog. Grog was stupidly overpowered for us level 3 players. He started us off on level 3, by the way, just so we could start fighting some of the bigger things immediately, one of those bigger things being a basilisk. We were supposed to be looking for a missing brother of a tavern keep with a special hammer we could return back with, but along the way, ran to a cave with a basilisk. With our OP Grog being too tall to enter, we had to fight it alone. Of course, I was turned to stone before initiative was even rolled, and was stuck like this throughout the entire fight. Afterwards, I got turned back to normal, and we had to rest for the night to prepare ourselves for the oncoming journey. We were given another magical dream sequence, except this time, we had to roll to see what kind of dream we had. Me and Emily both got nightmares, revealing more about our backstories, but the other two rolled in these dreams, these very particular dreams, they got to choose who was involved with them, player character or non-player character. Of course, Emily's boyfriend chose Emily's character, but Ryan chose Kerr, my character, and our dungeon master described all of this in detail. I was so shocked and so uncomfortable, but continued to stay silent, as I seemed to be the only one not having fun and didn't want to ruin the mood, but God, I was in agony. But after the long rest, we were led higher up the mountain to another icier cave that had a silver dragon waiting for us, guarding the corpse of the brother and his hammer in its pile of treasure. As me and the rest of the party scrambled around trying to think of a way out of our imminent demise, it turned into a woman and asked to strike a deal in return for the hammer. What did it ask for? a mate. Still, in session 0, and this dragon already wants to bang one of our characters, and unfortunately, none of us were parts. The only man in the party was Emily's boyfriend. Hey, don't underestimate bisexual dragons. Anyway, the dragon declined him because he was ugly, so that either left me, Emily, or Ryan, who was literally begging to be with this dragon. But surprise, it said no to his character because she was also ugly. Me and Emily were in such a weird position because neither of us wanted to do this. We literally played rock, paper, scissors to see who would fall victim, and of course I lost. At this point, I just wanted to end this as soon as Kerr got done by this dragon. But hey, at least afterwards, I got to keep all the riches the dragon had to make me a millionaire. Oh, and the dragon stayed in the group to continue trying to lay my bird, whose sexuality was not decided by me, by the way, but the DM was the one who forced it. More stuff happened later in the session, like the DM giving Kerr an armor piece that could grow wings, despite me asking him not to give her flight, Emily's boyfriend having a potion that would unwillingly change his race into a dragonborn spilled on him, the DM implemented a breeding season mechanic that would make certain races have to roll to see whether or not they were horny enough to... Oh, and of course, none of this would be a complete horror story without him sending illicit pictures of anime girls without consent into a Discord with everyone able to see it. And this was all in session 0 / I'm pretty sure session 1, because you're doing stuff. Anyway, but it's safe to say that once that session ended, I immediately texted the DM a stupidly polite message in tears saying that I was leaving the campaign, when in reality, I should have told him something more along the lines of... "You're an incel, I hope you stub your toe on your way down your mother's basement," or something a little bit more silly like that. Emily, unfortunately, stayed, but also left when he tried to get her to say, is this some ALO thing I'm too asexual to understand? He wanted her to say that behind her boyfriend's back in order to get more levels in their next session. The whole thing fell apart, and Ryan was the only one willing to stay. By far, this has to be the worst way to be introduced to D&D, but luckily, I did not give up my hope for this hobby, as now I'm in a long-term campaign with by far one of the best DMs you could find. At least this does have somewhat of a happy ending. While the airship is of course more legendary, this comes close in terms of horror. This guy is absolutely crazy. From the get-go, we have extremely inappropriate illicit content that people do not want, while at the same time ignoring people's requests to stop. I understand the writer's hesitation to call them out during the session. When you feel like you're alone in these issues, it makes you way more hesitant to say anything. And look, if these people want to have fun with their extremely explicit, inappropriate, weird D&D games, more power to them, but you don't need to be there for that. Strange that you called this session 0 though. This seems more like a session 1, but either way, you left early, which was the right thing to do. This DM does suck though. Session 0 isn't for just playing D&D. Session 0 is to clarify what kind of content is going to be in your game. And with this kind of game, that is a mandatory thing. But hey, at least you found someone much better, which now that I said out loud, that's not really much of an accomplishment, but look, it seems to be working out for you. I'm part of a small D&D group where everyone's familiar with each other. One of the 4 players had to leave, so another player, Abed, invited his friend Britta. The campaign has a mission system where you're rewarded points upon successful completion. Points can be used in exchange for magic items, which have effects unknown until purchased. One of the hardest missions gave points, and only 3 points. We had saved 1 point from our previous mission, so we entered the reward center where you can spend these points. We now have 4. One of the players was missing. How about Clarence? So only me, Abed, and Britta were there. Both Abed and Britta laid claim to items. They had a conversation with little input from me before buying their 1-point magic items. Abed took his items, and I asked Britta not to make a purchase without discussing it first. Britta ignored my words anyway. I, miffed, began to say how we should be talking about this, as there was a 6-point item, proving that more valuable items can appear. We've been buying measly 1-point items for this time, so it might be better to save up for more expensive items, since the 1-point items weren't that good. They responded with how they did talk about it, which I replied that I didn't get a say. They then began to speak about how Clarence would want another item, with which I disagreed. I said that we should talk about it a bit more, but Britta said that they had spoken for 20 minutes and they were bored of talking. They then said the majority had ruled. My opinion was moot. Incensed, I warned both in and out of character that I would attack if Britta attempted to take another 1-point item. Britta ignored me and provoked me as they reached out to grab it, so I attacked. They were already at 1 hit point. I missed though, and then the administrator of the reward center intervened. Britta taunted me and spent the point. We ended the session there. I spoke of my grievances. Britta insisted that talking for so long was boring, and the majority, Abed and Britta, had decided, while I said this was an important decision to make, so we should talk about it more, and that D&D is a game where everyone matters. In the end, the Dungeon Master said that everyone would get a say, no matter what, but the majority rules. I speak of how I'm incredibly frustrated. I explained that Britta had won, and that I was about to ask something unreasonable, but I would appreciate some consideration on Britta's side. So I asked him if he could just promise me that he wouldn't spend points just because he wanted to. Nope. Okay, I just left. Now, I feel like I'm in the wrong for attacking, but also that I had some justification. I enjoy discussing items and choosing effectively, and Britta doesn't have the right to take that away. It was the end of the session anyway, and although we had about half an hour left, I felt like it was more important to have a discussion. Next, it's the team's points, not their points. Just because the majority says one thing doesn't mean that I just get ignored. We're 3 people. I constitute a major part of the team. Finally, I feel like I was being cornered with no way out. Am I the a-hole? Oh boy, okay, here we go. Some of you finally got what you wanted. Yes, the a-hole! Seriously, the TM probably shouldn't even let you make the attack in the first place. At the end of the day, you had your 20-minute discussion. You just want a longer discussion because it didn't go your way, but that's not how these things work. The DM is right, you got a chance to participate in the discussion, but you just didn't win. I'm sorry, man. Look, it sucks to get outvoted, but let's say hypothetically you did get your way. Now, 2 people are miffed. That's not good. Look, if Britta really did buy the item all smug-like and all that, well, that's kind of rude, but at the same time, you did take a swing at them, so, you know, that's not great either. It doesn't matter if it's in-game. Attacking other party members over stuff like this, not a good idea, man. It's an out-of-game problem. You can't use an in-game solution of PvP. You just wanted things one way, but I'm sorry, man. It's the other way. I used to play D&D at a game shop with a mix of friends and acquaintances. The Dungeon Master was an acquaintance, but seemed like a good dude. Then there was this other new guy, problem player, aka Sokka, and my 2 friends, both female, one of which would play a Moon Elven Cleric and the other a Drow Sorcerer. The fact that my friend chose a Moon Elven Cleric was probably the impetus for the new guy to play as quote-unquote Sokka, because, you know.
My first girlfriend turned into the moon. That's rough, buddy.
He said he was going to play this Last Airbender character as Sokka, but more based. He was one of the worst players I have ever dealt with. He, the player, had serious main character syndrome, and this was poorly masked by his character's obnoxious arrogance. He was very quick to murder NPCs, usually for no good reason other than the NPC pushed back against his BS. He would always claim to be the leader of the group and get super aggressive when anyone, especially women, challenged his authority as a man and a leader. This usually meant that whenever a female NPC came around, he would either be extremely confrontational with her or hit on her in the cringiest way possible. Like, I remember when we encountered this female peasant rebel leader of a liberated town. He would not stop mocking the idea of a female leader. He asked her for her body count and demanded that she get on her knees and... What? Anyway, when she refused, he attacked her with his sword. He defeated her and made sure to take her down non-lethally, so the DM decided that she was a fey spirit, had her body turn into spiritual energy and float away. He later admitted to me that he wasn't originally planning for her to be a fey spirit, but feared what kind of sick things the player would have done to her. Look, I'm fine with in-game sexism, but this guy's playstyle was straight up immersion breaking. It made it hard for the actual female players to play since his sexism was spilling out of game. This became increasingly apparent when we found his Instagram account, and oh boy, this guy did not take the red pill. He swallowed the whole bottle. The party unanimously decided not to kick him because we thought he was just pretty young. He just graduated high school and would grow out of it when he eventually interacted with a real woman.
Who hurt you? And why didn't it stick?
I remember Moon Elf jokingly saying, every campaign needs at least one a-hole. But this is where things take the messed up turn. You see, Sokka was flirting with Moon Elf this whole campaign. We were fine with this, even as his flirtation got more desperate. Moon Elf eventually told him that she could never be with him because he's just projecting his feelings for his old girlfriend onto her, and that her connection to the moon would not bring her back. In my opinion, this could be a great character moment to plant the seeds of character development for this douchier version of Sokka. But that's not what went down. Fast forward to an encounter with some ogres, and Moon Elf is knocked out. During the battle, Sokka rescues her by taking her to a nearby cave, and then saying out of nowhere that he makes love to her as if he's making love to the moon.
That's
Cringe.
buddy.
The DM says, you know she's still knocked out, right? And he said, I know. Moon Elf told him to cut it out. She doesn't want to do this. And the DM said, no doing that with player characters. It's literally the only rule for this campaign. You already know this. And then he says the most disgusting thing I've ever heard him say. He said, it's not that if she likes it, and I roll a performance check to see if she does. And the DM just shook his head and said, okay, Sokka, before you roll, Zuko appears out of the shadows of the cave, casts firebolt on you, and burns you to a crisp, and you die. He then creeps back into the shadows and spontaneously disappears. And then DM told him to leave the table, and that he was sick of his crap. He tried to argue and say, it's what Sokka would do, and no girl could ever resist his thing. But the DM just kept telling him to leave the table more firmly. We just carried on as if he died before he could even think to do what he was going to do, and Moon Elf lived as DM just wanted to not let that be her last memory as her character. So he obviously got banned from the game shop. He also blocked us on literally everything, which is fine by me. He just beat me to it. So yeah, if you're reading this quote-unquote Sokka, thank you for ruining a great character. You just suck on multiple levels. TLDR, an incel plays as a version of Sokka and tries to assault an unconscious character and justify it in real life. The DM kicked him, and he had to be manhandled out of the store because he wouldn't leave. Dang, to that last bit, I was wondering what got him out of the game, but hey, at least you got him out eventually. Frankly, should never get that far. The moment stuff gets a little bit too forward, that's when I start sweating bullets. This sort of behavior is not okay if it's just sprung up out of nowhere. If you clarify in session 0 that this sort of super explicit content is fine, then okay. But if you don't, it needs to stop, even if you personally don't mind. You don't know how everyone else feels, and you don't know how it will escalate in the future. I get the guy is young, but I mean, he graduated high school. That means he's an adult or close to it at least. I understand high school stories are a running thing on this channel, but it does not excuse Andrew Tate-esque behavior like this. It's funny too, because I forgot a big part of Sokka's arc in Avatar: The Last Airbender was overcoming his personal biases and sexism. I guess this guy must have really loved Sokka pre-character development and must have really hated the show for, you know, making him into a better and more awesome person. Alright, that was a fun episode of RPG Horror Stories. The moment I got that Sokka story, I knew I was in for something fun. But if you guys enjoyed it, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of our content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tip series. We just did our Halloween episode where you guys were so supportive of my AmITheA Blight Owl House cosplay. Thank you so much for your kind words. They've truly touched my soul. But anyway, if you want to check that out, it's linked in the cards. And while you're there, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, "You're not Sokka," to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, if you have your own stories, you can send them directly to us. There's an email linked in the description down below. Send your stories our way for a chance to be featured in one of these videos. But hey, even if you don't have any stories, unless like, comment, subscribe, I'll see you all next time. Farewell.
You don't wanna be anybody else. She's a woman in total control of herself. It's such a wonder to be under your spell. What a woman in total